When gospel star Kim Burrell and preacher Gino Jennings found themselves at the center of public backlash, it wasn't over music or doctrine, it was over power, pain, and the voices of those they once silenced. For years, they were respected and even idolized. Kim Burrell, the voice of gospel elegance, and Gino Jennings, the bold leader of a strict movement, stood tall in their ministries. But now, the spotlight isn't showing admiration. It's exposing hidden truths. So, what really happened? In this deep dive, we uncover the stories that sparked outrage, the sermons that shocked audiences, the accusations of spiritual manipulation, and the growing demand for accountability inside churches once considered untouchable. This is not about questioning faith. It's about confronting behavior. What you'll hear may disturb you, but it's the truth. People are finally willing to speak. Kim Burrell once moved crowds with her powerful, jazz-infused gospel vocals. Known as the industry's secret weapon, she was praised by icons and adored by fans for her range and raw spirit. But over the last decade, that praise began to fade. What started as whispers turned into widespread disapproval. Her words spoken from the pulpit would change everything. It began in 2016, during a sermon in her Houston church. She spoke about homosexuality with a tone that many found cruel and offensive. The video went viral. Within hours, news outlets condemned the message. Activists, artists, and former supporters demanded accountability. Major appearances were canceled. Her performance on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, alongside Pharrell Williams, was scrapped. Overnight, she went from celebrated to condemned. Many pastors defended her freedom to preach, but even fellow gospel singers distanced themselves. Kim Burrell didn't apologize. Instead, she stood her ground. She doubled down on her views and refused to soften her message. In 2022, another video surfaced, this time of Kim speaking to a congregation. She mocked people for their financial struggles. Her exact words were, "Some of y'all are broke, living from credit card to credit card, and still talking about you got favor, please." The room she spoke to laughed nervously. Many accused her of classism, arrogance, and using the pulpit to shame the very people who once lifted her career. Instead of expressing regret, Kim went live on Instagram. She claimed her words were twisted by bloggers and haters. "Y'all want me to be fake? I'm not fake. I'm real, and I speak the truth. If you don't like it, unfollow me," she said. And that's exactly what happened. Thousands unfollowed. Concerts were canceled. Her songs were pulled from radio rotations. What fans didn't know was that this wasn't new behavior. Former musicians began to speak. Anonymous backup singers and band members started posting their experiences. They described her as brilliant on stage, but unbearable behind it. One singer said, "It was like walking on eggshells." You never knew what would set her off. Stories of shouting matches, controlling behavior, and ego-driven rants flooded forums and private chats. To many, this was the side of Kim Burrell hidden for years behind her voice and fame. Some fans still defended her, calling her bold and honest. Others said this was a prime example of spiritual ego. One fan commented, "She forgot the mission." It's not about how great you sing, it's about how you treat people. Kim Burrell had become a symbol either of truth-telling bravery or of everything wrong with modern church culture. But while Kim was facing online backlash, another storm was building on a different stage. Gino Jennings is not the kind of pastor who seeks approval. He built his ministry on being different. The founder of the First Church of Our Lord Jesus Christ in Philadelphia, Jennings preaches with fire, strict doctrine, and no tolerance for what he sees as compromise. His messages have gone viral with titles like "Pastor Destroys Fake Churches" or "Gino Jennings Exposes Modern Christians," raking in millions of views. To his followers, he's a warrior of truth. But to many others, he represents something dangerous. Critics say his sermons promote fear and even misogyny. A particularly shocking moment came when he said, "You're not a woman of God wearing tight pants and makeup." The statement, broadcast to millions, triggered a wave of anger from women across denominations. The most disturbing revelations about Gino Jennings aren't on YouTube. They come from former members who left his church and lived to tell what happened behind the scenes. One woman went viral after she shared what she was told in his congregation, that if she ever left, she would go to hell. She was taught that every other church was false, and only Gino's message carried the true gospel. Others have come forward with similar claims. Some say they were isolated from family and friends, forbidden to attend college, or publicly shamed in front of the church. There are allegations of extreme control over women's dress, relationships, and careers. The environment, as described by ex-members, was one of silence and submission. If you questioned leadership, you were rebuked as rebellious. If you tried to leave, you were treated as lost. Earlier this year, an audio recording surfaced. A voice that sounded like Jennings told a room of leaders, "If you start letting women lead, you might as well hand the devil the mic." This church is for real men. The clip was never officially confirmed, but it spread quickly. For many, it confirmed their worst fears that his leadership wasn't just strict, it was toxic. Still, Gino Jennings's reach has grown. His YouTube channel has more than 400,000 subscribers. His sermons continue to trend. Why? Because he's found a niche: disillusioned believers who want tough messages and clear answers, even if that means trauma in the process. And while controversy keeps following him, it also keeps fueling his platform. As more people began to share their experiences online, a common theme emerged: silence, fear, and shame. Dozens of former churchgoers stepped forward with personal stories. Many described years of loyalty, only to leave feeling broken and betrayed. Some told of being pressured to cut off loved ones who didn't attend the same church. Others were warned not to question sermons or leadership decisions. One former praise leader named Nicole spoke publicly in a TikTok video that quickly gained hundreds of thousands of views. In a trembling voice, she said, "I was never enough. Not pretty enough, not rich enough, not anointed enough to stand beside her." She was speaking about Kim Burrell, recalling the emotional weight of trying to meet impossible standards. Nicole said she witnessed people being dismissed, ignored, and humiliated in the name of ministry. Her story ignited a movement. Soon, more stories were posted under hashtags like #ChurchHurt and #ZarChurchArt. People from across the country and beyond began speaking openly about their spiritual wounds, some caused by Burrell, others by Jennings, and many by similar leaders across denominations. These weren't just disagreements over theology. These were cries of pain. As traditional churches lost control of the narrative, social media platforms became spaces of reckoning. YouTube channels like Preachers Unfiltered began analyzing sermons and leadership behavior with intense scrutiny. In one of their most watched episodes, they played Gino Jennings's clips side by side with behavioral breakdowns of cult leaders. The comparison was disturbing. The host explained that this wasn't about attacking a church's beliefs. It was about identifying patterns of psychological manipulation. "When you punish people for asking questions," the host said, "when you shame them for leaving, when you use fear to control them, that's not leadership. That's domination." Thousands of viewers commented with their own experiences. Many said they'd always felt something was wrong in their churches, but didn't have the language to explain it until now. These watchdog channels grew rapidly, and they weren't just criticizing, they were educating. Meanwhile, Reddit forums and Facebook groups exploded with testimonials. Entire threads were dedicated to documenting encounters with Kim Burrell and Gino Jennings. Financial exploitation, public humiliation, emotional abuse. Each post painted a clearer picture of what many said had been hidden for too long. With the growing buzz online, mainstream media outlets began paying attention. News segments were no longer celebrating Burrell's voice or Jennings's charisma. They were covering the controversies surrounding them. Public interest was no longer about worship. It was about accountability. The media asked the hard questions. Why were these leaders allowed to operate unchecked for so long? Why did followers endure so much before speaking out? And why were faith communities so quick to excuse behavior that would be unacceptable anywhere else? One article featured the story of a family who left Jennings Church after 15 years. The father said, "I was told my children would lose their salvation if we left. I believed it. We all did." He said the guilt took years to unlearn. His teenage daughter described her time in the church as a nightmare of shame, control, and fear disguised as holiness. Millennials and Gen Z are turning away from blind faith. They're not rejecting God, they're rejecting toxic leadership. Church attendance among young people is down across the board, but engagement in spiritual discussions is rising online. These generations want transparency, not theatrics. They want pastors who lead with humility, not pride. They're asking new questions. Why is bold preaching being used as a cover for spiritual bullying? Why are leaders praised for being real when their honesty causes harm? And most importantly, where are the consequences? They're creating new kinds of churches. Even those who once idolized Kim Burrell and Gino Jennings are now rethinking their support. One former fan wrote, "I grew up admiring Kim." But admiration without accountability becomes idolatry. They're no longer willing to accept talent as an excuse for toxic behavior. The gospel is still sacred to many, but the curtain is being pulled back on the people presenting it. What's being revealed isn't always holy. The stories coming out about Kim Burrell and Gino Jennings aren't isolated. A system that values charisma over character. A structure where leaders are often placed above correction. And a culture where questioning them is seen as rebellion. It's the messengers who elevate themselves as untouchable. Some churches still refuse to address this. They hide behind tradition or blame critics for tearing down the church. But survivors say this mindset protects abusers. And every time their pain is ignored, the damage grows deeper. One ex-member described a moment when they finally left Jennings's church. "I felt like I had escaped a cage," she said, "but I also felt ashamed for staying so long." Her voice joins a growing chorus of those learning to separate faith from fear. Gospel fame is a strange thing. For Kim Burrell, fame once meant being honored on gospel stages worldwide. But now, it also means her every word is analyzed. Her sermons go viral for controversy, not conviction. Her fans now include both admirers and critics. For Gino Jennings, the fame came through his refusal to compromise, but critics say that same refusal led to a dangerous sense of superiority. He claims his church is the only true church. His followers often echo that belief. More and more former members are calling out the damage that came with it. When leaders start treating pulpits like thrones and churches like empires, the gospel gets lost in the noise. Real faith becomes harder to find under the weight of performance. For many former followers, leaving wasn't easy. Some left silently, afraid of retaliation or judgment. Others were forced out, shunned after raising concerns. A few stayed too long and paid for it with their mental health. One man who served as a musician in a ministry linked to Kim Burrell said he developed anxiety just from showing up to rehearsal. "You never knew what mood she'd be in. I saw grown adults cry after being screamed at." Another woman said she had to rebuild her entire life after leaving Gino Jennings's church. She lost friends, lost her confidence, and felt lost spiritually. As the truth spreads, many are asking what happens now. Will Kim Burrell change her approach? Will Gino Jennings face real accountability? Or will the cycle continue, fueled by denial and defended by loyalists? So far, neither figure has addressed the growing calls for change in a meaningful way. Both remain active. Their platforms are still growing. Their messages still reach thousands every week. But the tide is shifting. Public opinion is no longer silent. Former members are louder than ever. The conversation is no longer just about Burrell and Jennings. It's about a broken church culture. One that praises authority more than accountability. One that rewards bold voices but ignores those they hurt. In the middle of all this pain, something new is rising. A younger generation is stepping up. They're building churches where love is louder than fear, where honesty doesn't come with humiliation, where the gospel isn't used to control, but to heal. Pastors are emerging who lead by example, not ego. Worship leaders are creating music that uplifts without manipulation. Communities are forming where people feel safe to question, to grow, and to heal. These aren't perfect spaces, but they're honest ones. Kim Burrell and Gino Jennings still have followers. But now, those followers have options. They no longer have to choose silence over truth. And the church no longer has to protect leaders who harm in the name of holiness. But so is the desire for healing. The scandals involving Kim Burrell and Gino Jennings have revealed how deep the wounds go. But they've also shown how powerful it is when people speak up. This isn't just about controversy. It's about change. It's about reclaiming faith from fear and lifting the voices of those who were silenced. Whether or not Burrell or Jennings ever take responsibility, the truth is already out. And once truth starts moving, it doesn't go back in the box. So, what do you think? Has the gospel world finally reached its turning point? Can it be purified? Or has the pulpit been too damaged? The future of the church depends on whether we keep praising personalities or finally start protecting people.